Ben Harris-Quinney is a chairman of the Bow Group, which is a conservative think tank, and joins me live on the line. Good evening to you, Ben.
Evening.
Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us tonight. Do you think it was right that Nish Kumar was booed off stage for his act?
I do, and I completely disagree with your assessment that is in some way anti-free speech, because surely it's pro-free speech. If you're going to be pro-free speech, it's got to run both ways. You know, he can go on and give his show and say whatever he wants, but people have got to be free to not like it. And I think the fundamental problem with it was it just wasn't funny.
But isn't that the antithesis of what we've been told from the Brexit side of the debate? Not everyone, because I agree, not everyone will agree with that analysis, but that Brexit is very much about removing the shackles, having free speech, being able to say things that you like and actually be able to accept that, getting rid of that political correctness. So why didn't they just laugh along at themselves? Why were they so, dare I say it, snowflakey that they had to end it immediately and get him taken off stage?
Well, because I think it wasn't funny. I mean, if you look at the joke, he said that, well, I ask you to all go home and kill your Brexit supporting relatives. I mean, it's barely a joke. The problem is not that it's gratuitously offensive or that Brexiteers are snowflakes. I think the problem was he simply wasn't entertaining the crowd. And so free speech is about everyone being able to give their view, and clearly he did a bad show, and everyone there thought it was a bad show, and they told him so. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, if you're going to be a comedian,
do you think that he actually meant that?
Based on the quality of your jokes. I think there's far too many comedians nowadays that rise to prominence via institutions like the BBC. They're not funny. They might tick a certain box, but they're not funny. And they ultimately fail in the court of public opinion. I mean, my favourite comedians are people like Ricky Gervais, Stuart Lee, all leftists, but they're funny. And there's always going to be a market for people that are funny. I just don't think there's a market for people trolling out tired old tropes that are barely constructed as jokes and think that the nation owes them a living, because we don't. But
do you think that they then thought that he actually meant that they should go home and kill their ancestors or kill their...
No, I don't think that at all. I just think that it's...
Well, then it's funny. It's a joke.
It's barely a joke, you know.
But that's subjective.
What's funny about it? It's not clever. He's not saying anything insightful. I think particularly when it comes to subjects like Brexit and Trump, they've been so overdone that you've really got to come up with some interesting material beyond just, I don't like Brexit.
And it is cool and politically correct to say, hey, go home and kill your white grandparents. It is a bit, you can see how it's not funny, isn't it?
If you want to come at it from a I'm offended point of view, you can say, well, let's change the tropes around and say, why don't you go home and kill all Jewish people, or why don't you go home and kill all Muslim people? And many people would, I think, be much more offended by that. But
yes, but that's because, Ben, I don't need to explain to you, though, that the reason that the nuance about white people in that is because in most cases of his ancestors having been subjected to racial abuse, it has been, or any minority really, it has been, in most cases, white people have been the perpetrators of that. Now, that's just a historical fact.
If that's going to be a justification, you can say, well, most terrorists are Muslims, therefore it's acceptable.
No, but that would be factually incorrect, because actually it's far-right terrorism from white people that is actually on the rise more than anything else. So that actually wouldn't be factually true.
It's one thing to say a certain kind of terrorism is on the rise, and I haven't seen any evidence that is particularly the case. But if you look at the casualties caused by Islamic terrorism, it's far higher than any kind of...
No, but if you look at the incidences of far-right terrorism...
I view that people should be able to go on stage and say, kill all white people, kill all Muslims. If that's what they want to say, if they're making a joke on that basis, then let them succeed or fail on the basis of whether that joke is funny. I do think there's an extent to which you have to suspend offence for comedy and recognise that people are not actually seriously advocating that approach, but they're trying to make a joke, right? But as I say, I think the problem with a lot of these comedians that go out there and moan about Brexit and moan about Trump is the jokes just aren't funny. If they were funny, people would be laughing. People would be applauding.
So you think that had his Brexit jokes been funnier, he wouldn't have been booed off stage, and so had he not been taking...
And there are a lot of Brexit jokes that I have heard that are funny, that target Brexiteers and Remainers. As I say, I mean, almost every comedian now is left-wing. That seems to have become a transposition from the situation that was in the 70s, for example. But I think it was said best by... I was watching a set by Doug Stanhope, where he said there are two kinds of comedians nowadays, those that are woke and those that are funny.
It's true. I mean,
I think that's absolutely true.
I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but one of the jokes he was saying that started the boos was the boos started, and then he said, I'm going full Burko. I'm Burkoing it. Absolute Burko. I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to leave. Now, you would think that
Burko was there as well.
Burko was there. You'd think Brexiters would be relishing at that, but they were even booing that.
It's not that. I mean, the thing is, if he couldn't have been funny, because if he would have been funny, they wouldn't have booed him. They would have been laughing, because laughing's involuntary. You can't help laughing at something that's funny.
The Stuart Lee set where he absolutely laces into Brexiteers and laces into Trump, but it's not lazy. You know, he's thought about it. He's constructed a joke. There are complexities to it. And if that occurs, then it's kind of an involuntary response.
Yeah, you can't help it. That's the trouble with comedians. They don't have funny bones, a lot of them these days. They're just clever stories.
What you're saying, though, is completely subjective. And the way I see it, and I know you disagree, for me, it's the fact that they didn't like what they were hearing. They didn't like their own opinions being challenged by someone who had the audacity to do so by taking the mickey out of the fact that Brexit has been a complete disaster.
That assumes this was some kind of Brexiteer rally. It wasn't. We can't assume that everyone there was a Brexiteer, or even most people.
Well, then why did the booing start when the Brexit joke started then?
Well, I think because they were
you're saying that it was Remainers that were booing him.
In poor taste. And as I say, I think you can be offensive, but if you're going to be offensive, it's got to be done in a clever way that teases out a deeper meaning and that makes people laugh. If you're just being gratuitous and offensive for offence's sake, then I don't think people like it. And what you don't get, when you see all these BBC comedies and these panel comedies come on TV, and you get the canned laughter, you don't see the reaction of people at home. And I think people at home are rejecting it. You can see their viewing figures are plummeting. Things like Netflix with Ricky Gervais's supposedly highly offensive, un-PC stand-up shows are doing incredibly well. And I think the lesson is we've got too many comedians in Britain, as I say, that just aren't funny, and think all you've got to do is stagger out and say, oh, Brexit, oh, that's bad. Oh,
and the thing is, they will make a living doing that. And you can tell that the comedy isn't funny a lot of times, because
why didn't they just not laugh? Why did they have
because
to
they don't laugh? They don't. Well, no, I'm just saying comedy generally. They people applaud, don't they? Comedy
just
now.
Don't laugh then. Just don't laugh. Why did they have to boo him and throw a bread roll at him?
Well, they've had a few drinks, and it's still with the old days, isn't it?
If you go to a lot of comedy shows, if you go to an open mic night or something like that, there's a lot of people that will get booed because they're not very good. There's not a political agenda behind it. But I think what's amazing is this guy has the arrogance to think that everyone always has to laugh even when he's not funny.
Well, I mean, you could say that, but you've just advocated un-PC jokes, which I totally get. I mean, I think un-PC jokes can be absolutely hilarious, depending on who the butt of the joke is, but I agree with you, un-PC jokes could be hilarious. But it sounds to me like un-PC jokes are okay as long as Brexiters aren't the butt of the joke.
No, not at all. As I say, I've been in fits of laughter. I went to see Stuart Lee's last show. He's a Corbynista, loathes the right, of which I am part and parcel of. But his jokes about Brexit and Trump were well thought out. They got to a truth, and they made people laugh.
And would you have booed if you didn't agree with them?
I would have booed if it wasn't funny. That's the marker.
I think that's a bit rude, isn't it?
Well, no, I mean, look, if you pay good, a lot of these people have paid, I think, £150, £200 to attend the event, which was for charity, so it was for a good cause, but they're going there to be entertained.
And he wasn't paid, let's not forget that. He was doing it for free.
They loved Harry Redknapp.
And they're probably paying over the odds because they know the money's going to charity. But they did go for a night out. They did go to be entertained. And clearly, they weren't entertained.
They didn't boo Harry Redknapp off.
Well, was Harry Redknapp challenging their opinions?
From what I read, I wasn't there, but from what I read, they liked Harry Redknapp.
But was he challenging their opinions in any way, or was he saying things that they basically agreed with?
He was just being Harry Redknapp.
It was supposed to be about entertainment. You know, they're not there to necessarily sort of get into a dry political debate. They're there to have an entertaining evening. And from what I read, Harry Redknapp was well received, was entertaining. And as was Nish Kumar at the time, because I think he did the back and forth with Harry Redknapp. The problem came when he came on his own, and I just think did a load of lazy, poorly rehearsed jokes that didn't land in the room. The room didn't find it funny, and now he's invoking all sorts of political arguments when really he's just done a bad set.
Well, it just seems strange that he was really well received and everyone was laughing and finding him absolutely great and his jokes were good until the Brexit jokes came up, when suddenly he wasn't funny anymore. No one found it funny at that point, and it was justified to boo him. And I just, it's difficult not to see. I take your point, Ben, but it's difficult not to see.
But did he do any good jokes
with Harry Redknapp? And then it fell apart when he was doing his solo stand-up bit.
Because he can only do politics. There's a lot of comedians who will only do politics. They couldn't actually be funny.
I mean, he said that he was in, I think one of the first boos was when he said, I'm in a room full of people who probably would have killed my ancestors.
But that's not really very funny, is it? I mean, it's not.
Well, I think that's absolutely hilarious if you're actually in a room full of people.
You're not laughing. You're not.
Well, I'm not laughing now because I've known the joke, but I've heard the joke already. But
I suppose, it might be in the room full of those people.
I just think that's the whole point of comedy, is to challenge boundaries and to challenge people's opinions.
Well, no, I think
funny.
That is exactly the mistake that a lot of comedians make. They think that they're there to make some sort of political stance. What they're there to do is make people laugh.
Exactly. Yeah,
And I think that's where comedians need to get back to. There's endless amounts of politics and political commentators and all the rest of it. And sure, comedians can use that as material, but it's got to be funny. That's the marker, and that in many ways is the great thing about comedy. It's the great leveler. Doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, race, creed, whatever. If you're funny, you do well. If you're not funny, you don't.
It began with Ben Elton, didn't it, really? That sort of... it's funny because he's back now, but he is actually a funny political comedian, isn't he? He's quite clever.
Right, yeah, and his shows, Blackadder, all the rest of it, and I suppose Armando Iannucci is sort of the modern incarnation with the thick of it, and it's very funny. It deals with politics. It gets to the heart of issues, but it does so in a very intelligent, very funny way, and that's why I think people of all political colours embrace those sorts of programming. I'm a huge fan of Blackadder, a huge fan of the thick of it, but they don't embrace the lazy stuff, because I think it's been done so many times. Maybe it would have been funny on the day after the Brexit vote or something like that. But these sort of lazy...
But these were jokes about how the whole process had failed, that the process failed under Theresa May, and that it's failed with people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris being involved. Well, the day after the Brexit referendum, we'd never have known any of that would happen. The fact that it's 3.5 years on and we're still in this limbo, that's why it's funny.
But you've got to... the joke, I think, should be saying something new, should be approaching it from a new angle, rather than just trolling out the lazy old tropes.
I mean, I get that, but then to me that would sound like just don't laugh. It just seems odd that they couldn't even listen to it. They had to boo him and finish it there and then. But I take what you're saying, Ben. If it wasn't funny enough, maybe that's some sort of justification. That's Ben Harris-Quinney. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us tonight here on Talk Radio, chairman of the Bow Group, which is a conservative think tank. So over to you now.